Hello there. My name is Mrs. Elke, and thank you so much for joining me on my channel, Elke Art. Today I'm going to talk about a method that I like to use to help when drawing portraits, people portraits, animal portraits, but also in other things that I like to draw as well, and that is the grid technique or the grid method. This technique goes all the way back to Egyptian art, like way back when, but was also popularly used by artists in the Renaissance era, like Leonardo da Vinci and other artists throughout history as well. And the grid method has been used using like string and holding things up to real people, models and things, still lifes. But then once photography was invented, we also used the grid method on photos. And that is what we're going to do today. So today I have a photo of a famous celebrity, and that is Zendaya. And I found this photo online. I printed it off in black and white, and notice I have a grid over the top of the photo. Now to add the grid, I just put the photo in Google Slides, and I made sure that the slide was the size of 11 by 8.5 piece of paper. And then I drew a table on top and did my best to make sure that the table was a square. And you can change the size of the lines. So if you want the lines to be thicker or thinner, you can do that. So I made sure that the lines were black and I made them pretty thin. And then I went ahead and laid it on top of Zendaya's photo. So this is going to be my reference picture. It's a regular size sheet of paper, but my actual drawing will be larger. So I like to do a larger drawing than what my reference photo is, so that I'm not tempted just to trace the picture, but I do actually have to pay attention to each square. And I will show you in a minute, one of my favorite things to do when using this grid technique for drawing is to actually draw my picture upside down. And the reason I do that is because then no longer am I thinking, does this look like Zendaya? Is that her mouth? Does that look like her eyes or her nose? But instead I'm looking at, okay, where does this line go? Where does this line go? Is this darker or lighter than this section? And it helps me focus on the lines and the shapes and the values that I am using in my drawing, instead of, does this look like whatever I'm trying to draw, whether it be a portrait of a person or an animal or a still life or whatever else. So I find drawing whatever it is upside down to be very, very helpful. And I encourage all of my students to do this whenever we are using the grid technique. Another thing that you can do if you really want to focus only on one square at a time is you could use things like sticky notes or something like that to cover up the squares that you are not looking at, so that you only see the squares that you are. I know other times I have my students add letters and numbers to the grid so that they can keep track of which box they are on at a time. So there's a lot of things like that you can use to help you in using this grid method. But let's go ahead and get started, and I will kind of walk you through step by step how this works. All right.
So here's an example of grid art back in Egyptian times and here Renaissance times. You can see just holding up string to a still life will help, and then of course the invention of the camera changed everything. All right, for this project I'll be using a gridded picture, a piece of paper that's larger, a blending stick, pencil, and a ruler. And I'm starting off by measuring a line every 2 inches along my ruler, and I'm making little marks on the outside edges of my paper. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12-inch marks. 2, 4, 6, 8-inch marks on the top and bottom, so that I will have 5 by 7 inch or squares, 5 along the top and then 7 down the side. So my paper is actually 10 inches by 14 inches. And I'll tell you right now that my squares on my grid that are actually on the picture of Zendaya are not perfect squares. So my portrait's going to be a little bit more elongated than the actual photograph, and that's important to make sure that your grid is actual squares instead of a little bit off, because that can change your portrait. All right, now I am ready to begin. And like I said, I am doing this upside down. So I'm going to turn my reference photo upside down and begin drawing. And I like to start with kind of some of the main lines that outline the head. So I'm kind of looking here at where the hair line is, and I'm going to go ahead and draw the entire outside edge of the head. And I'm really paying attention to where the center of the squares are, and then I'm trying to see where her hair kind of connects past those center lines. So I'm trying to be really careful with how my lines connect here to each of the sections, and trying to just do one square at a time, getting this main outline in, working my way around the outside edges here. I'm making little center marks along here so I can kind of divide these squares up a little bit more. That kind of helps me make sure my lines are accurate as I work my way around the outside edge of the hair. And because I'm working upside down, I'm only focusing on where the lines fall instead of, is it looking like her yet? So this really helps me kind of focus on, okay, where does this line go and this line? Now, it doesn't really matter the order, but I'm trying to kind of block in the larger shapes first. So I'm doing the hair and kind of like the outline of the face before I dive into some of those smaller details like the eyes or the nose or the mouth. So I'm really trying to get kind of the outline done first using these grids. I'm really paying attention to where each line falls in each of the squares. Then I will go back in and add some of those smaller details, kind of working big to small for this section here. All right, I'm going to work with the hair that frames her face now, so her hairline, and really trying to pay attention to where it falls along the grid. And you can see, because my squares on my reference photo aren't perfect, my face is a little bit more elongated than the photo, but you get the idea. This is just to kind of demonstrate the process. All right, now I am using my grid to add in the mouth outline. I'm just trying to take my time, make sure I am really paying attention to where each of the lines begin and end, and the shapes that they make, how they meet in the grid. Trying to be very careful and conscious of each of these things. I'm just kind of working my way through her facial features now and really paying attention to where each of those features falls on my grid. Now that I have the basic outline, I am going to start with the shading, and I'm going to start with the lightest part of the portrait, and in this case it's the background. And instead of having it a pure white background, I am going to shade it a little bit. So I'm erasing my grid lines so that those don't show up. And I'm actually going to start with this blending stick here. I turn it on its side, and it actually has some pencil left on it. It's actually quite a bit, so I'm going to erase some of it so it's not quite so dark. But it has some pencil left on it from another project I did. So it's actually already adding some blending there. But otherwise, I am coloring very, very lightly with my pencil, and then I move in circular motions to blend this area in. And by moving in kind of a circular motion and using that blending stick on the side, or at an angle, I guess, instead of the point, that creates a very nice smooth blend. So notice how I'm holding the blending stick. It's not like a regular pencil. I'm holding it sideways, and even my regular pencil I'm holding kind of funny. And then I am using the blending stick at an angle to try to get the most surface area here as I am blending around my portrait. And I want to go ahead and get all of this area nice and smoothly blended, and then I will move on to another area of my drawing. And I am going to try to erase grid lines as I go so that those are not prominent in my picture. We hope to have none of those showing when we are done. Now I am moving on to the skin. That's the second thing I like to work on here because it's nice and light compared to, for example, her hair. So I'm kind of working with lighter areas first. And I'm noticing that the skin is darker than the background, so I'm making sure that those values are correct. I have my paper right up next to it so I can try to match those values as I am working on the skin tones here. And I can kind of draw in where that hair comes down, but I'm not worried about making it as dark as it should be because I'm not kind of working on the hair yet. But yeah, I'm working around the skin, starting with her neck and shoulder area, and then I will move up into her face area and really trying to use the same technique I did on the background where I color with some pencil first, and then I am using the blending stick in circular motions to blend it in. and I'm checking my reference photo to make sure that my values are correct. So how light or dark that I am drawing matches with how light or dark my reference photo is. It's very important to check those values to make sure your lightness or darkness of your drawing is accurate. That will really make or break the success of your shading. Now notice on her neck, she's got a shadow on the edges and right under her chin. So it's darker in those areas and lighter farther down on her neck. So I'm trying to mimic that with my shading as well, making under her chin darker and then other parts of her neck lighter. I'll do the same thing on her face, really focusing on where the darks and the lights are in her skin tones and trying to mimic that with my pencil shading and then with my blending as well. I am going to continue my shading process and am sticking with the skin all the way around here, and I'm just kind of looking for those lights and those darks as I continue to add shading to the face. Once I have added my skin shading, now I will go back in and try to add a little bit more to some of her features, like her lips, her nose, her eyes. I'm pushing down quite a bit harder now with my pencil, and you can even switch to like a 4B or a 6B to get those darks nice and dark. Trying to pay attention to the angles of the eyes, where the highlights are, things like that as I am doing this. And then the blending stick, of course, can help smooth out some of those lines so they're not quite so harsh. Same thing with the eyebrows, really trying to use my pencil to make darker marks so that those eyebrows are quite a bit darker as well. now I want to start focusing on the darkest darks, and this will help me kind of reach my full range of the value scale. So I started off with my lights, with the background and with her skin tone, and now I'm really trying to get those darks in there, those blackest of blacks. And I only have this HB pencil with me for my project today, but if you have a pencil like a 4B or a 6B, that can really help get those darks nice and rich and dark. So I recommend using a couple of different pencils to kind of create that look. I also am going to start adding those lines in the hair, and I'm really trying to push nice and hard to get that dark line around the face. And then I'm using some nice long lines for her hair as well. And I can use the blending stick just to kind of fill that in to help kind of smooth that out. Notice I'm holding both my pencil and my blending stick kind of on the side so that I can really use the side of them to get the most out of the process here. I really like to avoid using that tip of the blending stick, so I'm sticking with the side of it and then going back in and adding more darks with my pencil, as you can see. All right, now that I have been working on my picture upside down, it is time to kind of turn it right side up and really kind of say, okay, does this look like Zendaya or is it way off? And usually when you finally get to flip it right side up, there will be some things that are super obvious that need to be fixed. So I am looking at some of those things, and although the face is a little bit more elongated than Zendaya's, there are some smaller detail things that I can be working on to make it more accurate shading wise. So I am just going back in and doing what I can to at least fix those things and try to make the portrait appear more like the actress is in real life. And I'm adding some of those things in right side up. I'm just adding a couple more little details, things like eyelashes, a couple other little darks, and a couple extra little details to try to do what I can to finish the drawing of Zendaya. Now, is it perfect? No, but it is pretty detailed. It's pretty well shaded, and the grid has helped a lot in getting me to what I was hoping to achieve. I hope you have enjoyed this process and that using a grid is very helpful in helping you draw what you would like to practice drawing. It is definitely a wonderful technique if you know how to use it correctly, and you can see the importance of making sure your grid is actually a square grid. Hope you have enjoyed this video, and good luck on your drawing endeavors. Thanks for watching.